Hi, it's Bumble. Welcome back to my channel. So, I don't usually watch foreign movies a ton. I mean, just like movies that aren't in English. I guess I should probably just refer to it that way, huh? Well, I used to on my other channel, but it was mostly like animated stuff. I didn't really watch like live action stuff. This is a romantic, I guess you can call it sci-fi. I mean, one of the characters is a robot, but it doesn't feel sci-fi in the way of like it feels like futuristic, kind of romance something or other. I don't really know what to call this one as a genre. It's German. I don't. I've never really watched any German movies. Actually, no. There was one. I think the movie Persona is in German. I was actually almost watching that last night as well, and then I realized, oh, I want to watch this on like my TV because I found some sites that were like one of them was like you can rent from your library, and there was another one that was like for a student, and I found on like a student film site or whatever the movie Persona, and then I was like, wait, it's on like Max or something. This one, I couldn't find it on English. I ended up finding it on like Daily Motion or something, and it was in German, but it took forever. I was like, where can I find this on streaming? And I saw you had to rent it, which would have been fine. It was like $2, but wanted to see if it was on some of those like it was on one of those library sites, and I ended up finding it on like Channel 4, but you could only watch it in the UK, so it was just like round and round on like these like legit places, but then they wouldn't let me watch. So I ended up finding on Daily Motion, but it was on in German, and it didn't have English subtitles, but I was actually okay with that. Like I've seen this movie before. The reason I even know about it is because I found it on Hulu, and I like movies with like or like media with like fictional robot characters. I just kind of always have. I just find that interesting. But the romance ones are also interesting, where it's like, okay, it's like a human person dating a non-human person, but it's also like, the robots can be a little quirky or whatever, or it usually has themes of like, what is humanity, huh? But this one I find interesting because it's more of like it's not even anything of like what you'd expect of like the robot becomes more human over time or anything. Like he stays, I mean, he doesn't stay exactly the same. He does like definitely kind of figure out things that he likes and doesn't like or whatever. But oh yeah, I'm going to spoil everything in this movie. I'm just letting you know. But it's kind of more of the question of not even anything to do with the android. It more has to do with the human protagonist, Alma, and her feelings on love and like what is the right partner really. If you had a it's like the movie asks the question of like if you had the perfect romantic partner who was designed for you, is that a good thing? And just kind of like the ethics of that basically. And I think that's like an interesting approach. I mean, he is a robot and he acts like a robot and stuff, like with his movements and stuff. Um, but just the idea of someone who's like tailored around you and like should that be a good thing? And I think that's kind of like an interesting way to do it. And I actually did like watching it in German without any English subtitles because I focused more on and I already knew the plot too. I mean, I do like the dialogue of this movie. That's kind of where more of the romantic parts of it I feel like do come from. But you can tell from like the characters acting and stuff, like how they're supposed to be feeling, and you can like kind of follow. It's like you can follow along with the plot if you don't know what they're saying, pretty much. But it's like you can't like kind of learn the backstory and like more of the meaning of things. I did kind of use Google Translate throughout the movie. I would like pause and type things on my phone, but it wasn't all the time. It was like anytime I sort of vaguely remembered, okay, there's supposed to be an important line here, or like if the characters are in the middle of an argument, I would translate like a couple, just more out of curiosity though, not really necessity. Um, Dan Stevens, he plays the robot. I didn't even know that he knew German. Actually, he's a British actor. But I was reading a bit about him because there's like a bunch of reviews in this movie or like on people's blogs or whatever that he like kind of already knew German, and apparently like native German speakers thought that he spoke with like, it was described as like a robotic accent, kind of gives more of an uncanny valley. And I mean, I myself, like I said, I don't understand German, so that is not something I would have, I wouldn't have even noticed, and I didn't. I mean, he does sort of have a little bit of a robotic way of speaking, but like in general, I can tell that from like the tone of his voice. It's not completely monotone though. But just hearing that side of it is interesting, where like even in the language he's speaking, he still comes off as like off, but you know, it's like on purpose for the character. I think that's cool. But because I couldn't understand him this time, I mean, I couldn't understand anyone, but like, you know, I was focused on a lot of his dialogue and stuff. I noticed his body language more because he really goes out all out on like playing this like robot and stuff. He felt more like a robot because I couldn't understand. I'm not saying like, oh, everyone felt that way because I couldn't understand him. It was more of like, I'm trying to think of the way to explain this. Like with when I originally watched with the subtitles, or I can give you an example. I found a clip of a scene in the movie that had subtitles, and I watched it, and then I went back to the movie to watch the same scene just because I was curious. It's a part where the characters are in therapy and they're talking about like robots or whatever, and like I felt more disconnected from that specific character when I was watching when I didn't have the subtitles. But his body language is cool. I'll be like talking about it as I'm going through. Let me try and think of some examples. He does this little head tilt thing when he's trying to understand stuff. Not like the way a dog does when it's confused, but it's more of like when he's trying to like analyze stuff or whatever, he kind of does these little like head tilts, and the way he stares at stuff is like kind of interesting. And then he doesn't have like a ton, like all the time, of like human body language. Occasionally he does, like when he gets upset, he kind of crosses his arms a little bit, and that kind of helps with like, okay, betraying like anger, not like anger, you know, or what else? Sometimes he walks towards the main character when he's talking to her, but he does it in like a very slow way that doesn't feel like that this is not the way you normally like approach people. Or sometimes when he turns, you know how people like when I'm literally going to stand up and do it, like you go and you try to turn around and it's kind of slow, and it's like this circular motion you're going in or whatever, you know, or it can be kind of like jerky and stuff, like the way people move around. But when he turns in like a perfect 90-degree angle. It's almost like he just stops in place and then goes to the side and then keeps walking. Like he most of the time moves in a way where it's like that's not how people move and stuff. And I remember when I was watching with English subtitles too, he spoke in a way where it was like absolutely like perfect grammar and everything all the time, and that's like also not how people talk. Like there's this part where the physically when he reminded me the most of a robot. um oh yeah, I'm not gonna go over like the entire plot. I'm mostly gonna go over my note. I'll go over it a bit actually, in case you've never seen this movie. It's about this researcher. I think she's like an anthropologist, but I'm not sure, because she's trying to study these tablets. So she's not even involved with like robot stuff. I think she works at a college, and the robotics department of that place, they want to test their robot, and they design. She has to go through all these questionnaires or whatever. I don't think we ever actually see her do it. And they design a robot that's like her perfect man or whatever. I think that's why it's called I'm Your Man, you know. And she has to live with him for 3 weeks and just kind of like write these reports, see how he's doing, and just to kind of answer the question of like, A, should the robots be given rights, and B, should the robots be used, like people can use them as partners and stuff, like should people date robots? Those are the two things she kind of has to answer in like this 3 week long experiment where he has to live at her house, and she's kind of not cool with it. Like she meets there's a part where she meets the robot. His name's Tom, by the way. um like the opening of the movie I think is kind of fun, where it's like they're at a dance and all of the people around them are actually like holograms and stuff, which is, I guess they got hologram technology. And she meet you need then like the viewer doesn't know that he's a robot at that point. He just seems like a guy, like he's there. He goes to sit with her or something. They order some drinks. She asks him a bunch of questions about herself. And I only know because I remember, and I was also looking through the Wikipedia page just to kind of keep track of some of the important plot details as I was watching. And he answers everything correctly. It's apparently like questions about her too. And they go to dance, and he doesn't really dance with her. He kind of dances by himself, and then he glitches out. And it's like, I think the one time he like glitches out in the whole movie, and then you automatically know like, okay, he's a robot and stuff. And then she has to take him home, and she doesn't want to, and the only reason she agrees with it is she wants like funding to go somewhere for her research or whatever. And I feel kind of bad with the way she treats him. That's the big thing with this movie, is like how Alma treats Tom, because she treats him, even though it even throws me off when I'm watching, of like, oh yeah, he's supposed to be a robot. Like I've seen movies like this before where it's like, instead of being CGI or like a puppet or whatever, where it's like a human person, playing an android, but the android, doesn't have any robotic makeup or anything weird that would let you know visually like this person's a robot or whatever. It just looks like a normal person, so you have to rely on like, their tone of voice or their movements and stuff, which definitely happens here. So I kept forgetting, and Tom is like such a nice guy, and because I couldn't understand the dialogue, you know, it's like I didn't know if he had any lines that were like clearly like a normal human person would ever say this. It was more of, I could only really watch him through his actions and facial expressions, where I'm like, for the most part, he seems fine. So that was kind of interesting. Like I was even more thrown off. Like, is this person a robot? I mean, I knew he was, but yeah, he acts so much like a real person, and he doesn't really have any like. Okay, I hopefully I'll remember to post the Weird Science review before this, but it's kind of like the AI from Weird Science, where they're not affected by like things you would expect a robot to be affected by, and they're basically like a human person. I mean, the lady in Weird Science is more so like a, okay, that is pretty much a person. But here it's like he's able to touch water and eat things and basically do everything pretty much. It's kind of crazy. So I kept forgetting that he was a robot. Um, okay, the part I was gonna mention is the part where she, like, he tries to make a lot of romantic, like, actions and flirting and stuff with her, and she, like, keeps shutting him down on that. I don't mean literally shutting him down, but you get what I mean, the saying. Um, I wasn't even trying to make a pun on that or anything. Anyway, and she has him sleep in like a guest room. It's actually the place where she keeps all of her like vacuums and appliances, and I feel like that's kind of a visual way of being like, of showing like, yeah, she does treat him like a machine. That's a thing, and it kept throwing me off, where she kept being mean to him or treating him like a machine, and I'm like, why? He's basically like a person. But I mean, if I was in her situation, I would probably forget of like, at the end of the day, this is a computer, and I guess their feelings probably aren't like, he seems sentient, but like I kept forgetting like, oh yeah, he is just following orders and programming and stuff. But when they look like a person base, it's hard to remember that. But then every once in a while, you do kind of remember with the movie when he does something weird, like when he's in his little guest room or whatever. There's a part where he's doing these stretches and bends. It's like, okay, I have to try doing it too, but I can't actually do it or I'm gonna destroy my back. Where he like stands up and he doesn't move his feet or anything, like he remains standing, the knees don't bend, and he like moves and just leans like all the way back. I was trying to do it too, but I can't do it as much. And leans all the way back, not where his body is in like a perfect 90-degree angle, but like very close. And then he kind of moves his head side to side while doing that, where I'm like, yep, that's robot activity. I'm like, a person, I mean, I say a person, I mean, of course I know gymnasts can do that shit, but and the camera angle of that was so weird, because the camera is like right behind him, but it's not on his face or anything. Just the whole shot of that felt like some horror movie stuff where I'm like, that's how a monster in a horror movie would probably act, you know? I mean, I don't know if that was actually him doing it. Like, it looked tricky, but not impossible. And he's like a tall dude as well, so it's like, okay, that was a little creepy, you know? So I don't think he sleeps. I don't remember. Because then the next scene is the morning where he's in this robe that I don't know where he got the robe from. And he has this entire breakfast spread laid out, and I'm like, where did you get all the food for this? Because he apparently works in the middle of the night. He like reorganizes all her stuff, and I was like, how do you do that without noise? And I also felt bad for Alma because like she's a researcher. Who knows where he put like any of her research, honestly. But I was looking at the food on the table. There's like these pancakes and croissants, and it looked so good. You don't see it very much, except the pancakes had like powdered sugar, and I'm like, that does not appeal to me. But it looked so good, and then it does the thing that I hate in most movies, where like character A makes an elaborate breakfast that looks delicious, and then character B is like, nope, I gotta get to school or whatever, and leaves, and they don't eat the breakfast, and then no one eats the breakfast, and I'm like, bruh. Because that happens here, where he wants to have a romantic brunch with her, and she's like, I don't have time, I gotta get to work. She doesn't eat a single thing there, and I'm like, lady, you're wasting a bunch of food. And even though he eats, I know it's wasting because the next scene is him putting it all away, and it's the food is just gone, and I'm like, aw. Okay. And he does, oh, one other thing I was talking about his movements. He does this, like, little dramatic pose. That's what I wrote in my notes. I wrote little dramatic pose, and he's thinking, where he, like, puts his, you know, like, it's like what cartoon characters do, where they put their hand under their chin and your arms kind of like supporting your other arm, and you're like, and it always looks goofy. Like, that's always the telltale sign of like someone is thinking, but like no one probably does that in real life. It just felt too dramatic is what I wrote in my notes, and he does that every once in a while when he's like thinking about stuff. It's kind of funny. And then it goes to where they're out in public because he wants to like go with her or something, and he kind of almost reminds me of like a dog that's just happy to see you, basically. Because like he goes to this coffee shop, he orders her a coffee, he says something, and that's the point when I started Google translating every once in a while, where he like whispers something to a barista, and I translated it. I don't even remember what it is. I didn't write almost any of the translations in my notes, by the way. He says something to a barista. I think of like pretending to be someone who likes things or whatever. He says something weird because she gives him this look of like, what just happened? And that's when I was like, okay, I need to know what he's saying. And then it starts raining, and it turns out he waited an entire day for Alma in the rain, and he's like smiling. It doesn't make a difference to him or anything. And that's the thing without the dialogue. Like, he doesn't come off as creepy or like a robot or anything. He just comes off as like a really patient guy if you don't know what he's saying or remembering that he's like a robot. It's kind of funny. But he waits for her in the rain, and he's like drenched, and that's like one of the times early on she kind of softens up, where she is like, oh my gosh, you've been waiting for me all day in the rain. You didn't even try to find, like, he didn't even try to find cover. He just stood outside in the rain, and she covers him. They share an umbrella, and he doesn't try to get under it or anything. I mean, the thing about Tom that I also find interesting with this movie is like he acts like a person and stuff, but he knows that he's a robot and following orders, and he is like 100% okay about that. Like, he doesn't ever really get sad or anything. Like, there's one part in the movie where he sounds angry about something, but that's kind of about it, where you can see like, okay, this is a person who is developing that he doesn't like certain things or whatever. But then you don't ever really see him liking things, or you do, it's kind of subtle, but he's not like a very emotional person, so to speak. Like, he's like happy about things a lot of the time, and you kind of question like, is this things he wants? Is he actually feeling this way? Is he sentient to some degree? Or is it just that he's a robot and he's following his programming and he's trying to please like the woman he was made for? I don't know, I just keep thinking about that ever since I finished the movie. but he doesn't mind being in the rain and or really mind like a lot of things. And the music in this movie's nice too. I don't know if it's enough or I'll look up the soundtrack, but there was one song in particular I was just kind of like, this is nice. There's like this really calming music. I don't really remember what it sounded like. It was instrumental though. When they get home from the rain, and it gave me the vibe. It wasn't like jazz or anything though. Let me just clarify that first. Of like you're in a coffee shop on like a rainy day or you get home or it does pretty much feel like what happens of like they're in the rain and then they go home and they get into some warm clothes and it's like you're home. You're safe from the rain, you know? Okay, and then there's a part that was kind of a little funny where she no Tom, you know, because they change clothes. He's wet, she's not, and he sets up this thing in a bathroom, like it's like a dramatic thing when she walks in. There's rose petals on the floor. He's not in the tub or anything. It doesn't get like hanky panky or whatever, but he's like sitting on the edge of the tub with like a glass of champagne, and I only remembered the dialogue a little bit because it was in the trailer where he's like, "This percent of German women would absolutely love this," and she's like, "I'm the 7% or whatever," and he looks kind of confused, and then they go chat for a bit, basically about how oh yeah, he calls her out sometimes, which I'm really glad about actually, on like her being mean to him, not of like you're being mean to me, this is hurting my feelings, but it's more of like a hey, you'd feel better if you were nicer to me. And they start talking about the idea of happiness, and that's kind of where like this, I feel like psychological is not the right word, you know, like the deeper themes of this film kind of start coming across a bit, where he's like, don't you want to be happy? Why would you not want to be happy? And she doesn't, she just like, he's like, everyone wants to be happy and she just doesn't care or whatever. And she says something, and I was Google translating their conversation at that point about like something something something, isn't that what being human's all about or whatever. I don't remember what it was. And then the next scene was kind of interesting because whatever she said to him has some kind of impact. Okay, it shows Alma, she's smoking a cigarette outside, and then in contrast, I mean, before we see where she is, I actually thought it was her at first. It shows someone's foot and hands in a bathtub playing with these rose petals and these bubbles very gently. I kind of just assumed because the skin looked so smooth, I thought, oh, okay, I guess she decided to relax and take his advice and go take a nice bubble bath. Good for her. And then you see it's actually Tom in the tub, and I wouldn't have guessed until it showed his face, because, I mean, I get that he's a robot, so he's probably supposed to be, like, super, like, smooth and clean and whatever, but I didn't even, like, notice or something, because you just see someone sitting in there. And it's like, you know what? Good for him for not wasting the bubble bath, but then that's when I got worried of, like, is he gonna explode or something? Because he's, you know, mechanical. But no, he's able to sit in this bathtub. Clothes are gone. He's just chilling in there. But it was kind of like weirdly cute watching him kind of play with the bubble, not in like a childish way, but he's like kind of just, or it's kind of more of a way of like he's interested in them, of like kind of moving his hand around with these bubbles and these like little rose petals. He doesn't look like he's smiling, so I'm like, are you enjoying this? Or are you just kind of curious of like this is what taking a bath is like? But just seeing the full shot of like a bubble bath, warm candle lighting, the champagne, eating strawberries, but like it's one person instead of two. It made me realize that doesn't even have to. You always think of that automatically as like it's a romantic thing. It's probably two people being sexy in a bathtub, but like seeing one person there made me think like those things don't have to be romantic if you don't want them to be. It just sounded like it just looked like relaxing self-care, and I was like kind of want to try it. It just felt like a nice vibe. I don't know, like the bubble bath sounded warm and cozy, especially like you get out of the rain. Strawberries are one of my favorite fruits. I've tried champagne, I'm kind of mixed on it honestly, but there's just something about that like warm candle lighting that just looked so relaxing to me. And I do own a bathtub, except there is no way I would ever be allowed to have food up there. Um, or probably to get that candle lighting, but it sounded nice. I'm like, someday. But I was wondering how big the bathtub was, because okay, I don't know how tall that actor is, but he looked pretty tall compared to everyone else. I assumed like at least 6 feet or something. And I'm like, how big is this bathtub? He fits in there completely fine. No wonder you can fit two people in there. And then I was also realizing at that point, and I thought it was interesting how much of the female gaze. I think this movie is made by like a female like director though, which I find kind of cool. Of like how much the female gaze is in this movie, because like I feel like a lot of the time in romance movies, it's like the woman is the one that's like sexualized a lot. Even if it's like one of those rom coms where it's like a working woman and like the silly guy she meets or whatever. There's always like a point in those movies where they have to like go to a party or something, and there's always a scene where it's like she cleans up nicely, where she has to put on like a dress or whatever. And that never happens in this movie. Like Tom is the sexual object of this movie rather than Alma. Like I do sort of get why, like in an in-universe context where she's not really interested in romance, at least with this person. She's focused on her work. She's basically married to her work, and then he's designed to be like her perfect partner and is always trying to flirt with her. So like I kind of get it in that aspect. He's trying to make himself appealing, but just the amount of things that happen with him is just kind of interesting when I notice that. Like Alma is always in like button down shirts and pants and like professional clothing and stuff. She's like always covered up, except for like a couple of times in the movie, but I'll get to that later. And then Tom is like the more romantic one. It's like a reversal of norms where it's like we have sort of the female gaze of like he's in the rain, there's the bathtub close-ups, he's always like shirtless in a robe for some reason. I'm just not used to seeing that, but I'm happy. I'm like, okay, we're getting to see more of like what's it like on the opposite side of the coin, you know? What else? Oh, when they're talking about like when people want to be happy, I forgot about that. There's this part where she says yippee, but it's like sarcastic and kind of deep, where she's like yippee or whatever. And I like how the subtitle, it is basically the word yippee, like how it's spelled in English, but it's replaced with a J. But I'm hearing the word in English, and it was just kind of funny to me. Um, but yeah, just even the idea, like I mentioned with the gaze thing and the reversal of roles of like he's having his me time in his romantic bubble bath alone, and she's outside just smoking a cigarette. I think is a cool contrast. What else? What else? Um, okay, there's a part where I ended up pausing the movie a lot to translate stuff, where they get into an argument that I thought was one of the stronger parts of the movie. It's like later on in the movie, actually. Okay, due to some plot stuff that happens, Alma gets really upset, so she gets drunk, and then she wants to have like angry sex when she's drunk, but she's also kind of just getting mad at Tom. I feel like she's really getting her feelings out. They don't have sex though. Let me continue. Like she went from not caring about him to getting drunk and then asking like inappropriate questions and stuff. Like she asks like how sex works for him, and I accidentally did translate some of that part because I was like, what is she asking him about? And then I stopped translating, and I'm like, I'll wait a little bit. That's like the one nice thing of not having subtitles is like I can choose when I want to translate things or not, or like English subtitles. I hate when she bullies him though. Like she laughs in his face when she's drunk, and he like actually tells her to stop. Like she throws wine in his face, and he actually raises his voice, like telling her to stop. And that's when I was translating some of the lines, and I can like mostly remember what it was. Is like she um talks to him about like the sex stuff of like how does that work for you or whatever. It has to do with like sensors or something. And she throws wine in his face, and she's like, come on, I want to see some anger in that little machine heart. And he's like, stop talking to me like that. And then she goes up to him, and she's like super giggly too, where you can tell like, okay, she's drunk. And she like puts her hand on his face and like starts like moving around his nose or something. And he like grabs it. It's like the one part he shows a ton of emotion actually, where it happens faster than he can even like calculate it or whatever. And she calls him out on it too, where he grabs her wrist and he's like, seriously, just like stop it or whatever. and then she says something. It's like two words. I didn't catch it. I'm assuming it was something kind of snarky or whatever, and then he immediately apologizes and stuff. And then she asks him about, oh, did your algorithm react faster than you? And I thought that was interesting. Of like, it's the one time he shows anger towards her, where he wants her to stop. Where he's showing like, it's the example of like things he doesn't want in that sense of like he doesn't want her to do this stuff, but it's also showing what he wants of like, hey, just leave me alone and stuff. Like she doesn't like bully him throughout the movie or anything, but it's kind of really just here where she's just trying to more see like if he can get angry in the first place. And then he apologizes and kind of looks a little sad, so I'm wondering like, was that actually him for once? Maybe even going against the programming a little of like what do you want? You know, of like having these feelings and then it happens faster than like you following your orders. I don't know. I just keep thinking about that. It's like interesting to me. And then I feel like it shows a lot about his character where they go to another room and he knows she's drunk at this point, you know, whatever. And they're talking and he's like, oh, do you want to finally dance with me now or whatever? And he looks like he's getting into like a romantic mood. He tried to set up like some nice warm candles and she blows them out. And she's like, no, I don't want to dance. And she starts trying to take off her clothes. I feel like it shows a lot about his character of like, she wants to have sex with him. She never wanted anything romantically to do with him before this. And then he immediately picks her up and she's like interested, like bridal carries her a bit. And then he just puts her in bed and tucks her in to sleep rather than like taking advantage of her in her intoxicated state, and then strokes her cheek. And then she keeps trying to pull him back and he ends up telling her like, oh yeah, I'll see you in the morning or whatever, and he turns off the light. And I thought that was nice. Like the entire movie he's like trying to be romantic with her, and then I'm glad he doesn't like do anything to her. I mean, she wanted it, but like, you know, she couldn't really consent or anything. And it's I feel like it's also more of like, I guess, trying to look out for her safety too, of like knowing this isn't a good idea and that she'd probably be mad at him in the morning. So then he just leaves her there, and then what else? And then in the morning he's gone, and then it goes to some other stuff that's kind of interesting. She takes him to visit her dad, and her dad's like this old guy who's turning like 81, and her sister's also there. I think the sister's name is like Coral or something. And they talk about this childhood friend they had named Thomas that she was in love with, which I guess is supposed to like partially have inspired Tom. I probably should have been translating more at that point. But there's photos though, because at the end of the movie I thought like maybe Tom didn't, I mean not Tom, the childhood friend didn't exist. Like at first I was thinking about that, maybe the childhood friend didn't exist. But you see photos of him, he's real. It's just this like kid, he has brown hair. We don't see what he looks like as an adult, but like she was in love with him. So now I'm thinking like, oh, what if that, I feel like it brings up a lot of questions in my mind of like, what if this was her only time feeling attracted to someone, you know, just like how she was back then and then never again, and then those feelings kind of inspired this guy. Or maybe the worst version of like, what if she was imagining what her childhood friend could have looked like grown up or something, you know. But I do find that's interesting. Like I never questioned before that of like, you know, why does Tom look the way he does? Why is his name Tom or whatever? And now it's like, oh, okay, he's inspired by this person that she used to know, but she didn't end up with, and neither did the sister actually. But then there's more stuff I was confused about, because like later on, like way later on in the movie, she mentions, and it was only because I read it on Wikipedia. I should have translated the dialogue of that part about having a miscarriage, but like, you know, that would mean you'd have to like get pregnant. So I'm like, she was with someone, or maybe, I mean, there's also IV stuff. There's like other ways to have a baby, um, which makes a scene earlier on in the movie where she's like with her nephew who's like a little kid, and they're like hanging out, and almost seems happy with him, kind of just more sad with knowing that knowledge. There's like a lot of like backstory stuff they give for Alma, but and I feel like it's supposed to influence things, but I feel like it's not enough where I'm like connecting the dots. Anyway, then they go to hang out. They end up leaving, Tom and Alma, and there's a part where they lay in the grass where they're just chilling. That's kind of nice. And then there's another part where Tom is surrounded by these CGI elk and these deer, and he says that like they he doesn't smell like anything to the animals, so that's probably why they're not afraid to approach him compared to humans. Which, I mean, that makes sense. He wouldn't have a scent. He's a robot. I guess that shows his like non-humanness. But before that, I thought like that's an interesting choice. I thought it was supposed to be a metaphor for like how human he comes across, where like the animals can't tell the difference. Because I feel like in a lot of stuff, I even noticed it in like it makes me think of like fan fiction a little bit, where it's like animals are usually uncomfortable around like non-human characters. Animals can like in fiction can always tell when there's like a non-human person, because it's like a dog usually barks at them or acts really weird around them, and it's like it's probably like they detect what's unnatural around them basically. So I thought because all of these animals were near him, I was like, oh, this is like a metaphor or whatever to show like, okay, he's like human in their eyes. But no, then he says to Alma about like, oh yeah, the animals don't smell anything around me. So that kind of ruins it a little bit. But he didn't translate the rest of the dialogue around that. And then they run around in the grass, and he runs with like airplane arms, which is kind of funny. And it's like one of the times he does feel kind of human, though. It's kind of interesting to go from like, yeah, I don't smell like anything to the animals, and having like a weird moment like that to him, like being goofy and running around and stuff. And just the fact that he's able to make these like very like quick kind of impulse decisions like later on in the movie makes me think like, okay, he's growing a bit. And then what else? There's another moment that reminds me of robots later on, or like him being a robot is what I mean, where there's this woman who faints at a party and Tom catches her and then picks her up and sets her down, but like he carries her like he's nothing. It's not like how it was with Alma where he like immediately picks her up and like holds her and puts her down, but like with this woman, it's like he lifts her a bit too high where it's like, why is he carrying her like she weighs absolutely nothing? Like to the point where it's like suspicious. And the thing is, the human characters do know that he's a robot. Not everyone, but like the family knows. Like the nephew points at him to Alma earlier in the movie and it's like, there's a man here. And she's like, that's not a man, that's a robot. And he's like, whoa, he's a robot or whatever. And like, Tom is never offended or anything of like, these people know that I'm a robot or they see me as like less than or anything like that, because they do all talk to him like he's a person basically. And then there's a part where they go to a museum that I thought was kind of funny. He ends up sneaking into a museum at night, her museum actually, or like the one she studies at, um and she's wondering how he got in, and I only translated it a little bit, but it kind of almost, it's like the one scene where I didn't really need to, where he says something about like, I'm a computer, it's a computer, we communicated or whatever. And you would expect that, right, of like, oh yeah, of course he's got to be good with technology. Like you see that in robot movies sometimes, they can like hack into ATMs and whatever. um and she's like, really? And he's, or I mean, from there I'm interpreting just off the motions because I stopped translating because I like got the point. And he does this thing where he shakes his head, but it's in the way of like when you're denying something kind of funny. And he pulls out some paper thing out of his pocket that let him in. But the fact that he's even just telling jokes now was just funny to me. Um, why is it not letting me? It's not letting me scroll through the rest of my notes. I'm not really sure why. Let me try that again. I have more notes written. It's not. Okay, now it's letting me do that. Okay, hold on, wait. And then I forgot that like, you know, it's a romance movie. They talked about sex earlier. They're probably gonna have sex at some point in this movie. You would expect it would be like in the comfort of her home, or maybe it was in the grass or so. No, they have their sex scene in the museum actually. Um, which is just, that just sounds like physically uncomfortable though. Um, I forgot that's where they do it. And I'm glad we don't see anything either. We just see like their top half. So you still like you get the gist, but it's not anything too long or too short. I just as someone who doesn't like those scenes, I appreciated that of like you get the gist, it's a thing that happens and then it's over. And I guess Tom can sleep too. Okay, it was kind of confusing where it's like they lay next to each other in the museum, and then the next scene is Alma waking up, but she's at home. Tom is next to her, but he's snoring. I guess the robot can sleep. Um, so it's like, did he carry her home in the middle of the night? How did they get back? Because she seems almost confused of like, why am I back home? Um, so it's like they finally have their scene where they're like the closest they've ever been. And then the movie ends because she asks him, or like the plot anyway, she asks him to leave and end the experiment early. And I wrote in my notes, I don't get why she's upset. He's awesome. It's like, where is he supposed to go though? Like he's designed for her, so it's not like he's useful as a product anymore. And I hate that in robot movies. But I want to talk about something first. I mean, I because that's kind of where you can answer the question a bit, and I think she does explain it to him of like you're too perfect. Like, okay, I get the gist in the long term of dating a robot as a robot because it's like, he won't, I'm assuming, can't like grow old with her or anything and stuff, and the thing of like she'll eventually die and they can't have kids. Like those are the first things that come to mind. But this movie also questions the ethics of like it's less of like you're dating a robot and more of like you're dating someone that's designed to be perfect around you, which I find kind of more interesting. It's like the dating a robot thing is like, okay, he's like perfect at everything because he's a robot and he has to follow orders. Does he like really love you? You think about those questions, but it's more of like he knows everything about her, and that's probably not a healthy way to have a relationship of having someone that caters to you. Like he follows everything she says as well. Um but it's also like it's not like she can get to know him. Like he is sentient to an extent, but he's not like a human person that has like wants and needs. And the way he emotionally reacts to things isn't really as deep as like a human person. It's basically like if you lived with like a really hot servant that like knows everything about you, where it's like you could get along and whatever, but it's probably not healthy to be around someone that's like too perfectly designed around you. It probably would come off as like a very one-sided relationship. And plus you'd probably want to be around like other humans, but you'd probably have that feeling, right, if you were dating a robot and then you go to hang out with like actual humans, and like probably be a different vibe, you know so, like, I get it, but on the other hand, it's like he's so cool. Like, he's basically like a person, and he's so nice to her. And he does have moments where he can be a little silly and stuff. So I'm just like, damn. Because this isn't one of those plot things. You know how some of the movies where it's like a human and a non human, and then they only. I don't know, sometimes it's like they have like a week to hang out, or like one of them is going to die, or they have to like return to wherever. What always makes me sad in these robot movies is when it's like someone that's designed to do a specific thing around one person, and the person is like eventually gets uncomfortable and is like no thanks, and it's like what's supposed to happen to the robot? I mean, he's like a product. Yeah, he could go back to the factory and probably get killed, but it's also like he's like a sentient person and he's like designed around her. So just like, bruh. It made me sad because it made me think of the movie. It's one of my favorite movies actually. AI artificial attention AI artificial intelligence. I'm sorry. And it's a movie about a robot kid who he has his programming changed to like be the son to these two temporarily childless couple who have a son that's in like a medical coma, and then once they get their real son back they don't want the robot anymore, and they end up abandoning him in the woods, and it breaks my heart every single fucking time. And then the rest of the movie, it's sadder because it's not like, okay, the robot's gone, it focuses on the family. No, it focuses on the robot, and it's like you abandon a child in the woods, but it's also like he either goes to the factory or dies, or he has to like live out in the wilderness. Like he can't be returned because he's designed to. He's like imprinted on these people, and that's kind of how Tom is too. Where it's like you have this person who's like, yeah, he's a machine, but he's basically sentient. But like, you can't just have him be like it's not like erasing everything on your phone and having it sold to a new person. It's like that's your phone. So what happens to the phone if it's alive? I just feel like that's messed up. Like, I get how she feels, but there was also nothing that would have stopped them being together. I mean, I get that it's like an experiment, but I'm assuming because he's designed around her, I don't think the company would have probably taken him back. Maybe she could have just, stayed with him. I don't feel like how that would have, I mean, socially, I get how that would have, like, ethically messed up her life. But, like, in terms of how her life goes, it sounded pretty cool. Like, he was kind of looking after her and stuff, and she got to continue with her job. She's very focused on her career. I felt like she was almost becoming a better person the more she was hanging out with Tom anyway. I felt like they were good for each other. So it's less of like, I'm mad they don't get to be a couple. It's more of like, I get her viewpoint, but I'm kind of mad at her because there wasn't really a downside in the way she lives her life of like having him live with her. She'll go back to being alone, especially because she has this fear that Tom calls her out on in the first place of like her fear of dying old and alone. And I mean, yeah, she'll eventually be old and yeah, she'll eventually die, but she wouldn't be alone. So I just maybe it's because I'm single. It's harder for me to get. I don't know, but that's my opinion on it. If I ever do get in a relationship and I watch this movie again, I'll let you know if my thoughts on that change. So anyway, then he is like, okay, that's fine. The experiment ends. I'll just go. I don't remember if he tells her if he's going to the factory. I translated a little bit, but he says this line of like, an advantage of not living is that you can't die. And I wrote in my notes, like, you can. I mean, I get what he means. He's like, he knows he's not real in the sense that he's like a machine and his feelings are simulated and he was never alive in the first place, like born or like humanly born or anything. But I mean, it's basically like death, right? Like he's sentient, and if he goes to the factory, they'll probably like take him apart or whatever. I'll be honest, I almost cried when he tells her like not to worry about him. He's like, "Oh, yeah, I wasn't alive in the first place. Don't worry about me." And of course, at that point, she is emotional. She does care about him to an extent. Like she hugs him, and I guess that is kind of when I realized, okay, she is kind of right about her viewpoint. Like I was kind of starting to get it because, she looks like she's gonna cry, and she hugs him, and I feel like that's a valid thing of like you're basically sending someone off to death by choice, but and his face doesn't soften or anything. He kind of just accepts the hug and sort of hugs her back, and then he leaves. Like, we know that he cares about her, of course. I don't know if he's trying to, like, not make the goodbye harder, but it kind of almost hurts in a way where it's like we've seen him get more emotional about that. And what I mean by the face softening, too, is this. It was surprising because Tom does this thing sometimes where, when he says the wrong thing occasionally, or it just happens sometimes during the movie where he, like, smiles at people, but it's not like in a way of like I'm happy. It's more of like, oh, I'm trying to just make you seem comfortable around me, so I'm gonna smile at you. And he doesn't do that here. He's just kind of very static in the face. And then he just goes. I guess that's why he's not like dateable as a human. Because a human would have been more sad of like leaving a lover, and he cares about her a lot. We know that, but he is following his programming. Like, it made me wonder if he didn't actually want to leave, and he's just doing it because he's programmed to, or he knows it's better for her, it'll make her happy or whatever. It's kind of left a little up in the air, and then it turns out he doesn't go to the factory. He goes to Denmark, and the reason he goes to Denmark is because, okay, there's a place I think in Denmark where he like, okay, I should have looked up if it was Denmark or not because it made me wonder some things, where she met like her childhood friend crush Tom, Thomas. And he goes there and he waits for Alma. And he apparently walked there in 3 days because he mentions, like, I walked all the way here. My feet are burning. And she gives this speech. They, like, lay next to each other or something. And she gives this speech that I should have translated because it's the end of the movie. And then she closes her eyes. I think when I read it on Wikipedia, it was something about her friend Thomas, and she closed her eyes, and or she'd open his eyes, and he's gone or something. So then she closes her eyes, and the movie's over, and it made me wonder, like I thought she would open his eyes, and maybe like Tom would have left or something. Or I was expecting him to say something the first time I watched the movie, and I was confused. But I was reading a review, and maybe it was someone who understood the movie better than I did, where they were like, oh, we find out that her crush on Tom never really, I mean, Thomas never happened, the childhood friend. Like, the childhood friend existed, but he didn't have feelings for her or anything, like she imagined that he did. And it was supposed to be, like, in that sense, she knows Tom isn't real, but she loves him anyway. Like, it mirrors that, apparently, which I think is kind of interesting. I can't even call that an interesting take because I didn't know what she said at the end, but I thought that was an interesting way to end it. But it is kind of nice to know he didn't die, and she does find him again and stuff. Maybe it was supposed to be like a final goodbye. I don't know. I can't really give my thoughts on that ending if I don't understand it. But yeah, that's pretty much the whole thing. I liked it just like I did last time. Like, I mostly wanted to watch it because well, um I watched Blythe's Spirit, which is also a movie with Dan Stevens, and then I was like, I want to watch more movies with him. I've seen a couple of his actually. Like, I know he was in one of the new Godzilla movies. It was like one of the Godzilla Kong movies, which was cool, where he plays this like Australian zoologist, but for like kaijus. And he looks like he's having the absolute time of his life. And every time his character's on screen, 80s music plays, and it was fucking great. And then there's this, I think this was one of the first movies I'd seen him in. It's always weird for me. It's kind of like with AI, artificial intelligence, where it's like if I see a character playing a robot and that's the first role I see them in, it's going to view how I view the rest of their career. It was the same with what's his name, Hallie Joel Osment, who's in AI, artificial intelligence, because then I saw him in The Sixth Sense and I'm like, whoa, you're acting so human. It's like, no shit, he's not playing a robot character anymore. But it always kind of throws you off, you know, because I feel like when people play robot characters, they kind of, you can like see it in their body movements and stuff, and it's like they're not as relaxed as if, like, you know, playing like a human person. So it's like, whoa, you know, when you do see them finally play a human person, where it's like, okay, this was like the range, I guess. But he did good. There's another movie of his I'd seen where he plays Charles Dickens, and I watched it over Christmas a while ago. It's pretty good. It just kept throwing me off because he kept, I think it's The Wig, where he kept reminding me of the Eighth Doctor, to the point where I'm like, this is the closest I'll get to another Doctor Who movie. But yeah, this movie's good. I have a soft spot for it, not just because I like robot movies or romance movies or anything, but I just think it's interesting how it tries to answer questions, but not about robots in like the typical way you'd expect. It uses robots, the idea of robots as like a vehicle for the real question of like, if you had the perfect lover that's designed around you, if you had like the perfect person to date, is that a good thing for both you and society? And I feel like Alma comes to the conclusion, the reason she ends her experiment is like, it's enjoyable. We give into those things because we're human, but it's not healthy in the long term. And even though I kind of do wish that she got with him and stuff, because he was great. Um, it's also like, yeah, I see where she's coming from, which was kind of funny when I read the Letterbox reviews. It's always funny reading Letterbox afterwards, where it's like some people give these like really long, detailed descriptions, and other people are give like the funniest. Just I've thought about getting a Letterbox account. I watch like a ton of movies, but I don't know. Maybe I should. It's just that I've watched so many. I don't know if I should log them all in. I don't even know what I would write. Like, do I want to write something meaningful? I guess I could. These videos are basically me giving my like, I had some funny in there, but I give like my honest opinions, and Letterboxd could be for like what's my thoughts in like 3 sentences. But it was funny because some of the comments were like, this movie is just basically like, would I be with this robot? And it's like, yeah, and it just simplifies it enough where I mean, that is basically her choice too, so I don't know. All right, but yeah, that's my thoughts on the movie I'm Your Man. I'm glad I was able to find it and watch it because it took too long, and I'm sad it's not on Hulu anymore, and on some places you can't watch it unless you're in the UK, which I think is like why? It's a German movie in German, so I don't get it, but it's like thanks Channel 4, very cool. I even made an account too, and then I found out I can't watch anything on here. Cool. All right, yeah, I don't know what I'm watching next. We'll see. My dad was telling me about a movie called Nobody, and that got a sequel recently. But then there's also like the new Mission Impossible that's coming out, which I need to see in theaters. And there's a Wes Anderson movie called The Phoenician Scheme that came out, and I like Wes Anderson, but I'm worried because I've heard that people don't like the movie, and I'm like, uh-oh, I'm finally gonna see one of his movies in theaters. But we'll see. I might go back to gaming for a while. Alright, bye bye.